Welcome back, everybody, to Aaron's Opinion.
Start button.
We
Pause.
are very, very glad and very honored today to be joined by Emma Krebs. I'll start this conversation just like I start every conversation here on Aaron's Opinion. Who is Emma Krebs?
Great question. My name's Emma. Hmm, I'm an innately curious person. I am fascinated by the world and other people, and I feel as though I'm on this like constant quest to figure out who I am as an individual. I love doing things such as podcasting. I love reading, spending time with my loved ones, and I've picked up new hobbies such as arts and crafts, like painting and things, in the past few months, which has been great. So that's a small snippet, I think, of who I am.
Beautiful. I really want to get under your skin today and really want to dig into this. You say that you are innately curious person. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, the title of your podcast involves curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, to you, how did you come to this level of consciousness to understand innate curiosity? What is innate curiosity? How does that relate to you? How do you put it into your podcast? How do you put it into your life?
Hmm. I think curiosity is something that I I didn't really ever like actively seek. It was just the more and more that I let down my guard and I expressed myself authentically in the world, I began to understand how it really is just innate. It is just a part of me. And the innate curiosity bit that actually came from this person I was dating one time. They were giving me a compliment and it always just kind of stuck. I don't think he knows now, but anyways.
Okay, you
And
do. Wait, you do know that you're being recorded, right?
yeah, oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay.
And so from there, like as I've kind of like gone on and really went on kind of like this journey of like breaking through kind of just like the world I grew up in and like previous narratives, and I just kind of like went out into the world literally and metaphorically just to kind of like figure out more about myself and the world. I realized that I am just curious, and like my curiosity goes beyond so many other elements. Like I am genuinely fascinated by like how the world works, or you keep saying like, what do you think about the universe? And I'm like, I wonder, I think of these things. And I just think that curiosity has been such a valuable piece for me. And another way that it's been so beneficial to me in my life, I think, is meeting a lot of like narratives or emotions that I have within myself, or maybe judgments, with curiosity, as I find it's kind of like a neutral emotion. It's not it doesn't have like a hidden agenda. It's a very pure thing. So when I meet a lot of like challenging moments or emotions I might be experiencing with curiosity, it's actually been a really like healing and almost like logical experience. So I'm not too sure if that made sense.
It made a lot of sense. It made a lot
Okay.
of sense. Well, a little bit more about me to let you take a drink of water and listen to me for a minute. So, as you know, you don't know a whole lot about me, but as I've said, I'm Aaron Richmond, and I was born blind with glaucoma and a congenital heart defect. And life truly is a journey, and I oftentimes wonder, will I ever know the truth about the universe? Will I ever know the truth about aliens? Or will I ever know the truth about this and that and the other? And I think that if we truly knew the truth, then our lives would, of course, become meaningless. Then life wouldn't have meaning. But what about digging into more of your personal stuff, like your blindness journey? Were you born blind? Were you born sighted? What's going on with that?
I am born sighted, and I feel as though I've only recently been exposed to the blind community, and I'm still learning so much.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, yeah. And that must be very, philosophically that's hard for me to understand the people who become blind later. I'm 31. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 25.
You're 25. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So, for people in my generation, it's a lot harder. Well, not necessarily my generation, but the people who are born blind, like me, we don't know anything different. I've had surgeries to correct my vision to some extent, and I have usable vision, but we don't hold on. The way that I can express it to you, Emma, is we don't hold on to being sighted. We don't have that grip of being sighted, and we don't view the blindness as a loss. So now you have to spend the rest of your life, adapting to being a successful blind person, and that is very, very, very overwhelming. What is your vision? What is the cause of your vision loss, by the way?
I don't have a vision loss. I mean, I wear glasses and contacts,
Okay, are you
but
blind?
no, I am not.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
mentioned this to you before that I am like
Oh,
fully. Did I use the wrong language? Maybe I am fully
you
sighted.
might have, or maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm not quite understanding. So go. Maybe I mixed it up. That's totally fine. So go back and explain it again, because you used the word blind, and maybe your answer just didn't. Either I didn't hear it right, or it didn't make sense to me. So let's clarify. So are
Hmm.
you blind or sighted?
I am sighted. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yes.
That wasn't clear, and that's totally fine. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, sighted people are on this show a lot. So then how? Well, then I would have to ask a follow up question. Then how did you get in contact with the blindness community? Our great friend Lance Johnson,
Hmm.
and that's how I found out about you, by the way, through Lance
Hmm.
Johnson. So how did you come in contact with blind people initially?
Can I share an experience of my first time, like
Sure.
in person being in contact with it? It had nothing to do with the podcast. This was years ago. I was living in Australia, and like unfortunately, it took me 20, I think I was 20 or 21 years to really be exposed to the blind community. And if anything, like I wish it happened sooner. And I used to work in a health food store, and we had a woman come in, and she was, I believe she was, and also too, I want to say, if my vocabulary is incorrect at any time, please correct me. But she had like a care person with her, but I believe she was like fully blind. But to interact with her and navigate the store with her was so fascinating. And I have like so much admiration for the disabled community, and I'm learning so much from it. So that was my first, honestly, like genuine um experience, like that I can really say was more personal to myself and had a greater impact. So since starting my podcast, the intention with my show is to broaden my perspective through learning about other people and hearing about their perspective. And so once I started the show, it was kind of my excuse to go out into other communities that I might not have had access to within my day-to-day life. And so with that, I began to seek people that lived life differently. And so I think I'm not I can't remember exactly how I met our friend Lance. But I think it might have just snowballed off of different guests that I've had in the past, and we might have connected through socials from there, I think.
More than likely. And I found out about you through Lance when Lance put up a reel on Instagram about all the great guests that he's talked to or had, and then I just went down a list of all the guests and found you that way. So
Mm,
that's how I came to find you originally.
okay.
But by the way, for the record, yeah, you probably did mention that you were sighted, and that's totally cool. Well, what happened, just to kind of recap, the timing of things, is that last month I was in France, and when I messaged you the first time, I was in the States. So probably between the time that I was in France and the time that I came back, I actually probably forgot a lot about you.
That's okay.
Is the truth is the truth of the matter. Nothing
That is all
personal.
good.
It's just on a big long vacation. I wasn't doing Instagram. I wasn't following. I kind of paused everything. So that's probably what caused that. But yeah, that's really, really, really fascinating. So you're a very curious person, Emma, and you really want to learn from others. So, but what I would like to know now is, really what lit a fire under your ass to really start a podcast. I mean, more people listen to podcasts
Hmm.
than record them, and it takes a lot of courage to
Hmm.
basically talk to strangers every day on a podcast. So what tipped you over? But by the way, this is well, I'm not afraid to say anything on my own show, but this is a pretty risky thing to say. Usually a lot of not all, but a lot of podcasters are men. There are great women like you, but a lot of them are men. And a lot of them, and a lot of times, if you're a woman podcaster, you would be a little bit intimidated, a little bit concerned, or not even concerned, but a little bit apprehensive, should I say, about talking to some, men all over the world. So, really, what type of person are you? What tipped you over, and as I say, lit the fire under your ass to actually start your own podcast?
Yeah. I will say on that whole last bit is I don't think I was ever intimidated as a female podcaster as like a host, but since starting my show, and we can get into this later, I actually now work in podcasting, like beyond just my own show. And what I am coming to discover is it is such a male dominated space. And also too, like I always I always make these jokes. So I'm a 25-year-old female, and there's nothing wrong with what I'm about to say, but I have a lot of friends that are 40-year-old dudes. And so because of the industry that I work in, I do find that it is a lot of men that are like a little bit older than me as well. So I think that's kind of a funny bit to add. But to
Yeah.
your question there, I always wanted to create something, I guess is the word. And I had tried so many different things. Like I tried starting a blog or like running an Instagram page, like with the intention to just grow that Instagram page. I just knew I always wanted to create something, and something that I hoped added value to other people. And so when I first met my partner, we used to kind of like daydream about different things that we wanted to do, because we never really identified with like a conventional 9 to 5. We wanted to do something that went beyond ourselves. And so through conversations, I really would always go back to the value that podcasts had in my life, and how they were able to, without sounding cheesy, like broaden my perspective, just like my show. I'm learning through my own show. And so I was like, you know what? I want to contribute to this space and I want to be a part of it. And so it took me a long time, because as you said, it does take a lot of courage. It is a very vulnerable thing in so many different assets of even talking to strangers from all around the world, but also just like putting yourself out there online, especially in a longer form medium. And so I think I bought a microphone in when I lived in Australia, and for about 6 months I used to play around with the microphone, but I'd be way too nervous to actually record something. And then through I had moved back to my home country of Canada, and I was getting a job in the corporate space, and I needed a lot of background checks. And that resulted in me having about a month of like unemployment, but I had to wait for this next job, right? And so this microphone was sitting there, and I just was like, you know what? This is the time to do it. So I kind of channeled all my energy into the podcast then. And it was January of 2020, nothing to do with COVID, this whole curation of it. And that's when it all started. And I've been on a journey with it ever since. I'd say it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I bet you could probably speak to this too, Erin, because you have quite a few episodes. But I find a lot of podcasters fall off after like the 10th episode. And that's completely fine. But it's like, I think people don't understand how much work goes into this beyond just what we were talking about, of like the internal shifts of like having the courage to put yourself out there, talk to strangers, or record the episode, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah, you'd be surprised. You guys at home who are listening, you'd be surprised. It's By the way, Emma, I got to give you a lot of kudos and a lot of credit. You're extremely easy to work with as a guest. You held on when
Oh,
I
thank
was in
you.
France, and you were really. By the way, you were really cool when I got confused. I really appreciate that. Other people would
Oh,
have
of
been a little bit
course.
more. Yeah, well, not of course. Some people. Hey, it takes practice to be professional in a podcast when there's slight misunderstandings like that. You handled that beautifully. The other thing you have to learn as a podcaster, by the way, is you have to learn how to talk to guests. Like you have to learn how
Mm-hmm.
to contact someone. You have to learn how to negotiate that, how to convince them to talk to you, and that is
Mm-hmm.
really really hard. I'm sure you get this too. Most Many of the people that I talk to as a prospective guest, many of them never actually get into the Zoom call and become a guest. Most actually don't. Many don't. Many do not. Many,
Mm-hmm.
many, many. So considering that, it's very, very special that we've been able to connect today in this moment, because so many people should be or would want, so many people around the world are wanting to be guests, and you're very fortunate to be the next one who has managed to hold on long enough for me to, set up a day and time.
Mm-hmm.
I got into podcasting similarly to you. I still am and was at the time about 7 years ago, I started teaching English as a second language online. And I'm someone, as you can tell, I love to talk. I just want to talk, 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 talk all day. It just makes me happy to talk. And I've always just been a vocal. I just love talking. So I was teaching students all over the world on online, on Company X, we'll call it. And when I wasn't doing that, Emma, I was listening to podcasts in the blindness community. Okay, now, Emma, what do I mean by that? You were just about to ask the question. I'll save your voice for a minute. You might want to ask, Aaron, what do you mean by blindness community? What I mean is podcasts that are generally hosted by blind people, like Aaron's opinion, but generally, though, directed to a blindness audience. Your podcast is wonderful and it's directed to the world, and that's fine. That's all fine and well. But there are several podcasts that are very famous that are specifically marketed towards the blindness community. And this is a very interesting section and niche for you to delve in and learn more about. So, having everything to do with COVID, because COVID was going on, I didn't really have a whole lot of students at the time because, I don't know, too many teachers got onto the platform and pushed me aside. And then I thought, a lot of these blindness podcasts, they just are not open to my opinions. And I love talking about my opinion. So I got a microphone and I pushed record and I started recording answers that people were talking about on Facebook, and people were asking me things in the blindness groups. How do you do this? How do you do that? And I kept on, recording answers until it occurred to me that the people who are asking the questions are an audience. And if I'm answering the question, I'm a host. So it kind of developed just sort of on its own accidentally. And then I just loved it more and more and more until where it is now. And it's taken a very long time for it to get to the now. This now has taken a long time. So that's how I got into it. You also mentioned that you work now in podcasting. So what do you do?
So I do at the moment, I actually do a variety of things. I think you could call me a freelancer. I don't have a specific job title. So probably 50% of my work, I actually work in marketing, specifically in like social media management. And so that's kind of my one spiel. But in regards to podcasting, so this time last year, I actually was living in LA. I don't know if you remember, Aaron, but you were quite confused about where I was located.
Emma, do you realize that at this point I should be more confused, not less confused?
Yes.
First of all, confusion about whether you're sighted. Okay. You start out by talking about Australia. Okay, then you're back to England. Then you mentioned, oh yeah, I'm a Canadian. Oh yeah, definitely, I believe you. You're from Canada, eh? Oh yeah, definitely, I'm believing it. Then you start talking about LA. Emma, are you real? Okay, we're gonna have to figure this out. Okay, because let me tell you all the countries I've been to. Here, this should solidify the thing. Okay, my heritage is I descend from Polish Jews. Okay, I studied abroad in England at the University of East Anglia. I went to school in Baltimore. Now I live somewhere in the United States. I don't give that out, by the way. Somewhere in the United States, not in Baltimore. By the way, I speak French as a second language. Je parle français. Bonjour. I've actually recorded an episode in my second language in French with a French person, actually. I've been to France. I've been to Poland. I've been all over the world. I've even been to Eswatini in Africa. So that's who I am. Okay. Now, how are you all of these things? Who are you?
um, Yeah, so I lived in Australia for this. Mine is less exotic as yours. I lived in Australia for 2 years.
First of all, you didn't live in Australia. Okay, first of all, let's go over the basics of life here. First of all, you were born in Canada, right?
Thank you. I was born in Canada.
Okay, I was wondering. I was wondering. Wait a minute. Were you born? Okay, we have to solidify the basics of human life here. Wow. Okay.
It is a blessing. It is a blessing. I was born.
Nervous. So you were born in Canada. Okay, very good.
Yes.
Very good. I won't even begin to ask you what province or city because there's probably 10 different answers. Okay, let's just go with born Canada. Okay, Canada. Then from where did you go from there?
I never traveled much as a child, and then once I obviously I took one quick trip to Europe when I was like 19, but when I was 20, I moved to Australia on just like the working holiday visa. Hundreds of thousands of backpackers do it a year. And so I lived there for 2 years, and then although I wanted to stay, I had to go back to Canada because I couldn't get a visa. And then COVID hit. So I lived in Canada for about just over 2.5 years. And so in August of 2021, I actually applied for an internship to work on one of my favorite podcasts, which is the Minimalist Podcast. And I actually got the internship. And so I was provided 2 weeks to literally quit my job, sell everything I owned, get rid of my apartment, say bye to my loved ones, my partner, everything, and move to Los Angeles. So I did that. It was a very rush experience, but like everything happens for a reason and no regrets. And so I spent about 4 months living there. I say living because I literally signed a lease, the whole shebang. But long story short, it is very hard to get a visa in America. You're very, very fortunate there, Erin. And so I ended up having to go back to Canada. And my partner is actually from England. So in April of this year, we both moved to England. And now this is where we live at the moment.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Cool.
So that's my living situation. And then in regards to podcasting, so I still work on the Minimalist Podcast. I work remotely with them. And outside of my own show, I do podcast editing for just like other shows. Some are like long-term, some are just like I'll just do by project basis. But what I'm like also very passionate about is working with other creators to set them up in the audio space if they're not there already. So whether it's like maybe a YouTube creator or an entrepreneur, etc. But if I really vibe with them, and since I am so passionate about podcasts and I see the value in them, I really love working with them to begin creating their own show and help them with that journey.
What value do you see in me?
In you?
What value do you see? I wanted to catch you off guard like that. What
I love it.
value do you see in me?
Wow, great question, Erin. Well, to begin, considering that you are visually impaired, the amount of
Considering
respect
that you are considering that you are blind.
blind, is that correct?
That's
Is
correct
that the
if I
correct
said
language?
it.
Okay.
Considering that you are blind.
Okay, considering that you are blind, Erin, like that in itself, I can't put into words how much respect that I have for you. Just to navigate the world that I feel as though the odds are against you as an able-bodied person who is sighted. It's like there are things I don't even consider that probably endless things that I don't even consider that are large factors in regards to your day. So that I really respect. Also, too, you have a great voice for podcasting, and
Thank
just communicating with you so far, the little that we have, I really feel as though you do a great job in regards to your show and making your guests feel comfortable, communicating all of the information correctly, which I think a lot of people don't do nowadays, if I'm honest. Like you're very organized and
yeah, you got to be organized you got to be overly organized to be a podcaster. You definitely do. Yeah.
Yeah. There's quite a few things I could say, and we're still definitely getting to know each other, but I don't know, even just bringing it back to the podcasting, like you had mentioned earlier, like, oh, it's great, it's easy to talk to you as a guest. I do think that there's like these qualities in podcasters, like podcast hosts. It does take a certain person to be able to do that. And so as someone else who's like creating, who's trudging along, who's like trying to make this whole podcasting thing work, like I just have a lot of admiration for other people in the space that are also showing up and putting in the work too.
So what can you tell me specifically about your show? And what are some of the really fascinating stories that you've already covered on your show? And what are some dream episodes that you hope to record on your show in the future? Yeah.
So my podcast, I feel as though the name we've mentioned, it's called The Curious One. I feel like that says a lot about the show. It's a space for me to broaden my perspective. So I keep it broad. I know that in marketing, you're supposed to have a niche, a specific audience, but I really don't want to. And because it is an extension of myself, it's like I'm so many other elements. So one day I'm going to talk to an entrepreneur, another day I'm going to talk to a sex worker, and then I'm going to talk to like a yogi. You know what I mean? I love talking to people that might be on like the cusps of society. I don't know if it's the right language, but just people that live an entirely different life than myself. That is the episodes that I just love so much.
Yeah.
some of my favorite shows so far is, I can't remember the numbers. I sent them to you, I think, but I spoke with, I'm gonna demolish his name. His name's Christoph Zanchek Denik. Oh, okay, it's been a year. I can't remember his name. His last name is quite difficult to for me to say. So, anyways, his name's Christoph, and he is dwarfism, and our conversation, I feel as though they always go really well, but this one we just like connected another way, and we ended up like meeting up in real life. I was living in LA at the time, so like we went for coffee. He's just like such a fascinating dude. He's like a really good surfer. He like does acting. He's just so cool. That's definitely one of my favorite episodes. I also recorded, I think it was episode 42 with someone who again is my friend now in real life, which has been a huge element to my podcast. Like the majority of people I've met through my show I've created a personal relationship with them in real life, which has been so amazing. But I spoke with Becca Shern about love and relationships, and it's a topic that I'm like very passionate about myself. I would say my relationship with my partner is like one of the elements of my life that I'm actually most proud of, and I feel as though our perspective is not as not necessarily not as common, but maybe not portrayed enough in the media. I think a lot of what's portrayed in the media I don't align with. So I really love to hear people with a different perspective around relationships. And I love to kind of give them more space to share their experience. So I think that's a bit about, but I mean, I could say so much about it.
So let's dig in deeply here, if you would like. Would you like to share with me more information about you? See, you've circled around it several times. So would you like to share with me more information about your partner and the relationship in this not quite unusual or maybe interesting relationship that you have? You seem really fascinated by relationships. So do you want to talk more about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Um, and if there's a certain direction you want me to go, I'm more than happy to. But
The direction that answers the question. So, do you want to talk more about your relationship?
yeah, I would love to. I can share how we met, which is kind of an interesting story.
Okay, let's start there.
Okay.
So, how did you meet?
So I mentioned my partner's from England and I'm originally from Canada, but we met in Australia. So we when you are doing a working holiday in Australia, you're granted a 1-year visa. But in order for you to get a second, sometimes now I think a third year, you have to do 88 days of rural farm work, which is honestly, Aaron, just slave labor. It's crazy how they treat the backpackers there and like the rules around it, and just like how there's no standards or anyone really monitoring it. So if I'm honest, my partner and I were very fortunate because we did speak English and English was our first language. So I definitely know, obviously there was so much privilege there, but I could see firsthand how differently I was treated to other backpackers. So we met in this like working hostel in the middle of nowhere in Australia. And it was like, I always joke that like if my partner could see me in one of the most challenging, I know it might not seem challenging, but I to explain the environment and the situation that I was in, like it was one of the most challenging things I overcame. And just for someone to see me and to meet me in that kind of like really vulnerable chapter of my life, I feel like kind of just like set the foundation for our relationship. So yeah, I mean, I I took like not like a year of Sabbath, but I remember I came out of a relationship and for a few years I really like stepped back and like refrained from getting into any like monogamous relationships, and got really clear on not only what I wanted out of a relationship and out of a partner, but also thought more about like who I am and how I can show up in a relationship. And I don't know if that's something that a lot of people really do. And again, I don't mean this in a judgmental way, just maybe an observatory way of, I think a lot of people get into relationships at times because not because they're really into the person, but maybe because the other person is providing them attention, or maybe out of some sort of external need of like wanting another person for whether it's like personal validation or just like literally just company. And maybe just like reasons that I don't really align with. And so my partner was very similar, where it was like an active choice of us wanting to be in a relationship. And that's something that we maintain throughout our, now it's been 4 years of every day that we wake up, it is an active choice to remain in that relationship with the other person. Even if we were to get married for like visa purposes and things like that, that does not tie me to this other person. I still need to show up and be my best self within the relationship, if that's kind of making sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you for saying so. I think there are a lot of people that don't show up. They don't show up in their relationship. They don't show up in their work. They don't show up. And people that
Mm-hmm.
don't show up don't get on podcasts. People that don't show up don't make it. You got to show up in life, even if you don't like what you do every single second, even if you aren't terribly thrilled every single second of your life. If you're dealing with public things, if you're dealing with other people, you just have to show up anyway. And people do not understand that. You just have to
Mm-hmm.
show up, even if you have to. Showing up means you show up when you don't want to. That's
Mm-hmm.
what showing up means.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's even more rewarding when you do want to. That's what showing
Mm-hmm.
up means. So I appreciate you for saying it. And you are very right. Visas these days are very difficult. It doesn't surprise me what you said about Australia. I mean, it's a country that the people who live there, descend from criminals from England. So it's supposed to be a penal colony to begin with. So I didn't specifically know that as an American guy. I didn't specifically. I mean, I knew about the backpacking there, but I didn't specifically know about that problem that you mentioned. But that doesn't remotely surprise me. I've had, over the years, I've had very few Australians on the show, and I don't know. Maybe it's just the distance. I don't know. Maybe the internet doesn't. Maybe the podcast doesn't get all the way there so far. But I've had a couple Australians who are blind people, and they've mentioned some things. They haven't mentioned the farming and backpacking thing, but that's incredibly interesting. So, the other thing is, so what if people work with you, and when people work with you? So what? Have you ever worked with anyone in particular who told you, Emma, I really want to be a podcaster, but I don't really know how to get into it. I mean, have you worked with someone from the ground up and then saw them develop and flourish into a podcaster?
Mm-hmm. I've had in regards to like helping other people start up their own show, this is kind of a new thing for me. I've only been doing it within the past year, and it's more so something I do out of like like obviously the money is necessary for me to live, and like my time is valuable, but at the same time I'm like just genuinely like I want this person to start a show. I want to help them on this journey. So with this being said, I'm new to it, but I've helped people that like usually a lot of the people that I'm talking to like have no familiarity within the audio space. Sometimes they don't
Mm-hmm.
have any sort of social media platform. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they have a larger platform, sometimes they don't. And so at least for myself, the reason too I think I might be so passionate about it, I just kind of put this together right now as I was saying this, is I knew nothing about podcasting before I started a podcast. And or like thinking about putting an episode on Apple Podcasts seemed like the most daunting thing to me. So everything that I have learned so far has honestly been self-taught. And so I think that's also why I'm so passionate about getting other people access to like the information, the resources, and yeah, but also too just because of such the positive impact podcasting has had on my life.
Right. Absolutely. I really like that. I think you are. I can already tell you're on the right track. You're doing it all for the right reason because you have the level of interest that you have really, you're really plugged in, and these are the type of guests that I want. And these are the types of people like you, Emma, that I want to work with moving forward on my communities, which I have. And very soon you'll be added to my private WhatsApp group and you'll be connected with all people in all parts of the world. I even think I have someone in that group from Los Angeles, Canada, England, Australia, a couple backpackers. I think we can arrange that in the group. I think I have those people in the group. But the fact is, you're doing these things for all of the right reasons. Now, I'm not saying that there are people in the space that do it for the wrong reason, but I am saying that I think one of the challenges and problems, and I wondered if you had ever, to what knowledge you can give me about it. Some of them get so big that they really lose the traction with the individual and it becomes harder and harder for people to get in touch and contact them. Have you ever worked specifically in helping other podcasters to maintain rapport with the public in a way that grows their show, but still gives the podcaster the chance to connect with all of the right people, because that's really hard. What do you think about that?
I want to ensure I understand correctly. Are
Sure.
you speaking to like, um, say there's a creator, their show really kicks off and they have a large following, and you're saying how do they maintain like that really personal connection to their audience, even though they're big,
Basically,
or
right. What I'm saying is, it's really because what I've noticed is once you get to the level of like people in the states that have like millions and millions of subs and millions of followers, it becomes really hard to connect on a one-on-one level. Have you ever
Mhm.
helped a podcaster at a high level, very, very large volume audience? Have you helped to develop a strategy that allows them to maintain a personal relationship with the right people in the audience?
So I haven't helped someone develop a strategy, but I actually work on a team on a high level show. So the Minimalist podcast, they have like, I think they get over like 500,000 downloads an episode, but like they're, some of them have like over millions of downloads. So they have quite a high level show. It would be higher if they did advertise, but in terms to like their values, which I very strongly align with, they don't advertise on any of their platforms, and they use platforms such as Patreon in order to fund their show, pay their team, pay me, etc. So with that being said, am I on the right track there, sharing about my experience maybe working with them?
Right, exactly. What have you found
Mm-hmm.
about that? Yeah, right.
It's been one thing, and this is like kind of a sidebar, is like I think a lot of times, especially someone like you and I, who I'm assuming you're a one man show, I'm a one woman show, I compare myself, and I get inspired, but I also compare myself to large creators such as the Minimalists, these guys I work with. I'm going to use them as an example in this conversation. And I used to be like, oh man, look at like what they're making. Like I know they've been doing this for years, but like how do they get all this content out on all these platforms? How is their lighting so good, etc. And I think the more I work with them, the longer I work with them, I'm beginning to understand a lot of these creators first off have a team. They might look as though they don't have a team, but they might even just have something as simple as a virtual assistant, maybe an first cut editor. Like there's so many factors that go into these shows. And so that actually has been almost a validating thing. Even working in marketing, a lot of some of our clients, like their personality is their brand, and they have a large platform, but the amount of people that have their hand in their account, it's crazy, but you would never know that if you were to just look at the account, right? But in regards to like maintaining that connection, I am part of like I do more of the engagement in regards to working with the minimalists. So I do have quite a parallel, or like uh I wouldn't say close, but like I am embedded a lot in like the audience and communicating with the audience. I also help run, they have meetup groups in over 100 cities, and I kind of help run those. So I'm communicating with them quite a bit, like the those different groups and things. And so I do think it depends on the creator, right? So like the people I work with, they really value their audience's opinion and their, or not their opinion, but maybe their feedback and their perspective. And I think it kind of goes in alignment with like using platforms such as Patreon really helps to maintain that personal relationship, because the audience that is there really want to be there and really have good intention and want to see you succeed. And so they're very respectful about the people that pay for their show, and really do their best to like add value to their audience's life. Is that answering your question a bit?
Completely. Completely.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And now that you're saying all these things, I'm really, really, really interested in what will happen after this episode, after we talk on WhatsApp. I'm just going through a list. So what other guests can I squeeze out of you here? How's this going to work? Because you know that I'm going to ask you later today. Hey, so can you put me in touch with that person, that person, that person? You just help me a little bit here. Get me in touch with some people. It's really hard to get in touch with these, with a lot of different podcasts from around the space. But when you share the episodes and when you work together, that's really what it's about. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting that you compare yourself to, that I can see critically, thinking critically to help you further. That in essence is a flaw, because the only podcast that I compare myself to is Aaron's opinion, and the only person I compete with is Aaron's opinion. There are other people that I might look up to in the podcasting space, Maybe I've always wanted to interview them, or maybe not. Or maybe I would say, gee, I would love to be interviewed by this person, or maybe not, but I only compete with me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I've gotten to this point, because the reasoning back before philosophically, where you said most people only produce 10 episodes when they get into podcasting. Actually, the I saw something on one of the Anchor articles or Spotify articles about it. I think the number is actually the magic 8. Most
Mm-hmm.
people who get into podcasting, yeah, it's fine. So let's just say 9. Okay, let's go
Mm-hmm.
between. Let's say most people usually produce between 8 to 10 episodes, and then they lose interest. Why? Probably because they compare themselves to people that are huge in the industry, and they compare
Mm-hmm.
themselves to that. And what they forget is, when you compare yourself to people that are that much ahead of you, number one, you're never going to catch up with them, and that's fine. But number two, if you stop producing podcasts, you're actually withholding a lot of knowledge from the audience, from your own audience, that could be very special to one other person. You never know what
Mm-hmm.
happens when one person opens a link, plays a video. Just one person can be helped. What do I say on this
Mm-hmm.
podcast? Help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow. That is probably why this podcast and yours are successful, because it's about the individual connection. And
Mm-hmm.
that I truly believe. But what do you think about
Mm-hmm.
that?
I think another things one, I think going back to like, I don't think people understand how much work goes into it. And so then maybe once they get to like episode 8, they're like, man, okay, that doesn't, because at least for me, I don't know about you, Aaron, but like it actually doesn't get easier with each episode. It
No.
actually gets harder because once I learn one thing, I'm on to the next, right? So there's always something new to learn, something new to improve. And so it actually, and even I always used to think, oh, my editing time will get quicker. It actually gets longer because
Sure.
now I'm doing color grading, I'm doing video, etc. But I also question um one, they might just not like it, and I commend them for trying, and if you don't like it, then let it go. But at the same time, I think maybe people's um expectation or their intention with podcasting just maybe not be might not be what they set out to be, or just might not have, they might not have the right intention with podcasting. I think maybe people think they start a show, instantly it's going to kick off, they see other shows go viral, etc., and it's like, no, it's what we keep going back to. It's constantly showing up every day, it's slugging it out, it's hitting in 100 episodes. That's such a feat, you know what I mean? And it's pitching different guests, them saying no, you following up a year later, you know what I mean? I think people think that it's going to be easy, or another thing I think people often do, and I've been guilty of this, maybe not in necessarily on podcasting, but other ventures I've gone down, is like we're just looking for that attention, right? And we want attention because we want connection. And so maybe they think that creating the show, it's going to provide them attention. And yes, you do get attention from it, but I think in the regards to long term, that attention isn't going to fuel you. You need to have like an innate, genuine passion and interest in the whole podcasting space, and a
Right.
reason outside of just attention in order for it to be maintained long term.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me just check something here really quick. Hold on here. Yeah. Good. Right on time. Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and like I tell people, I produce this podcast more for me than I do for. In other words, I produce this podcast more for how much it's helped me.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very, very medicinal to produce your own show, and it has helped me tremendously. And I hope that it helps other people. The overall overarching reality is most 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 shows. What is going this new iOS update on the Mac? This is just, my computer just been going crazy. All these new updates. The reality of it is that most shows never really get off the ground because they just are too overwhelmed with all that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
And most shows that are even good don't even get discovered. I always wonder how many other opinion shows are around the world that I've never actually heard of. I'm guessing probably a lot. Yeah, but all of that is really really fascinating. Um, and so, what are some of your other really fascinating life lessons that you've learned so far in podcasting? What are some other really interesting things that you've learned from some of your guests.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think, well, one thing that I'm going to start here, and maybe this will kind of like help me. But so when I started my podcast, I had stopped traveling and I thought I was done traveling forever, and I was really devastated by that. And when I went out, when I went traveling, one thing I learned from it was like how much I enjoy connecting with other people. Because when I was growing up, I didn't have many friends. Like I literally had two friends, and one of them lived in a different province. So I saw her like a handful of times a year. And the other one was like she was a professional ballet dancer. So she was never around. She was always training. And so um once I went traveling, I began to like see how easy it is and how natural it is for me to connect with people, especially on a deeper level. And so, with that being said, I wanted to continue having like deeper, more meaningful conversations, but I didn't have the space to do it. So, creating this podcast has provided a safe space for me to talk with people for like an hour, hour and a half, and just like learn more about them. And it also gave me an excuse to reach out and speak with people that, like I said earlier, I might not have exposure to in my day to day life, or people that are like experts in the field. And they normally would be like, well, why would I talk to you? I'm on my own journey. But if I have a podcast that helps share their story, their work, whatever, it's usually been like a good excuse for me to learn from them. And so with each person that I've met, each conversation has just helped me in a different way depending on the topic. But as I said, taking these relationships offline has just been so amazing, actually so healing, because like one of my good friends, she is a therapist. And so through meeting her through the podcast, I'm able to have these amazing conversations with her. Through her, I met her partner who does like a breathwork facilitator, and I've gone to breathwork. And so it's really just been like healing for me in my personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it also kind of like provided me more. Sorry, Aaron. Provided me more
Well, I didn't even.
confidence.
Oh, I didn't even notice
Oh,
that anything happened.
okay, cool. Provided me more confidence too of just like we kind of joked about like just meeting random strangers online on Zoom. Like I go and meet random strangers for coffee on all the time. If I could get paid to do it, I would make a full-time income. So it's just kind of like made me more open-minded and more comfortable in social settings too.
Yeah.
That's just a few bits of it.
That's more than bits. That's a lot. So Emma, so you seem really comfortable with using all this technology. So what have you found? Are you also a YouTuber? Do you also put your episodes on YouTube? Where do you find the majority of your audience? Just only talking about your show in particular, the one that you
Hmm.
have. Do you find that most of your audience is on YouTube or listening on the podcast? What do you think?
I would definitely, to answer your question short form, definitely just audio, but I only recently started doing video properly. So I have one episode with video. And then I actually made my very first like proper YouTube video outside of my podcast last month, which was like a whole experience in itself. Again, I'm just doing it for myself to learn these skills because of the spaces I work in within my career. I just know that I need to learn more about cameras, video editing, etc. So I just kind of like do just like the podcast. I do these things on my own show or my own platform, which is very small, but to experiment and play around so that for my paid jobs I can be more valuable too. So yeah, I definitely say audio, but I think video is very important now in the space because literally everyone is doing audio now, or sorry, video now, and with platforms such as TikTok and Instagram favoring reels and things like that, I think that it is important.
Yeah, yeah. Without a reel, I would have never found you. I would have never known of an Emma
Yeah,
Krebs.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting. My audience on YouTube, more people watch than listen, but the people that listen are more spread out around the world. So
Hmm.
it's two very interesting audience groups. You have the listeners from a lot of countries, and then you have the people that are watching on YouTube, mainly from North America and England. But it is a very interesting dynamic of two different, because then you'll develop two different audiences, the type of people that
Hmm.
like to watch and the type that listen. So
Hmm.
those are two different types of people, right? Someone that's
Hmm.
looking and someone that's listening. That's two different mindsets, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. And so, what are some of your like hobbies that you like to get into when you're not doing all this podcast and marketing work?
Um, I mentioned to you at the beginning, since I moved to England, I moved to a small town, and so like the pace of life here is a lot slower in this town, and I've been loving it. So I've almost just been connecting back to like my inner child and what I liked to do as a kid, and allowing myself to indulge in those hobbies. So like I've been painting and drawing, which like honestly, if you would have told me a year ago I'm doing this, I would have been like, because I was so like productivity focused and very much like, well, how is that going to benefit your career? But I am finding like just this creative expression has just benefited my mind and honestly my mental state in so many ways. I love being outside. I don't like cold, even though I'm from Canada and I'm from a very cold part of Canada. I hate the cold. um so I enjoy like going on as cheesy as it sounds, like I love going on walks. I think it's great. And I weight train. I've like very noodle arms, but I love weight training and just kind of like I always played sports as a kid, so
You couldn't, you really put yourself out there. Okay, you say you're into the long walks on the beach. You're into the weight
yep.
training. Okay, you could have just, you didn't need to mention the fact that you have noodle arms or weak. You could have left out the weakness and just said, yeah, I'm a weight trainer. Okay, like don't mess with me. Okay, why do you have to put yourself down? Don't just put yourself down. Okay,
Okay.
we have the public to put ourselves down. Okay, we have audience members that'll lash out in social media. Let the audience do that. Don't put yourself down. You love
Well, you know.
long walks on the beach, coffee shops, and
Yes.
you're a weight trainer. So don't try to do
Yeah.
anything. Okay, there you
That's
go.
another thing is I love. Oh, I forgot to say, like my number one thing is reading. Like reading, like such as
Okay,
podcasts.
that still doesn't contribute to the fact that you're a weight trainer, but yes, you still like to read.
Yes, but like I am gobsmacked when people don't like people that don't read books. I'm like reading books. Like nothing changes your perspective or just like broadens your mind more than reading does, or like listening to an audiobook. So that's another thing that I really enjoy doing, and I love. Like in Australia, it's one of the like coffee capitals of the world, and I learned to be a barista there, and from there, like my interest and like fascination in coffee, specifically maybe caffeine, has really been great. So that's another thing I love like a what do you call them? Like the trendy, as much as I say I don't like them, like the like hipstery, overpriced cafes, like I'm a sucker for it. I don't fit in, like I'm a geek there, but I love it.
Yeah, yeah. So, Emma, as we start to walk to the end of just a really fun conversation. I mean, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but and I mean this in a great way. You're all over the place. Your mind is bouncing off the walls here, and I just loved every second of that. You really, your mind and the way that you approach living and podcasting and talking, you are so active. You are an active person, and that's really what shined right through. But what I have to just say, really, what are some final questions that you have for me, and what I really want to know is how has speaking with me, Aaron's opinion, Aaron Richmond today, how have I, if at all, changed your perspective on life?
Hmm.
And then
Well, I
also
want to ask.
on top of that, I always like to say, if you can ask me any question, one more question to make me sweat to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster. What do you want to know? Okay, go from there.
Ooh. Okay, well, I have one question that might tie in with the first two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this might be kind of like my own ignorance, but I just want to understand is um considering you are blind, so every time I talk to you, like I hear that noise in the background, I'd just love to hear like more about in regards to just we'll keep it at
Mm-hmm.
podcasting. How what tools do you use in order to
Right.
assist you?
So usually I turn that off. That's the voiceover, but I wanted to dig in today because the computer was distracting me so much I forgot to turn off the voiceover. But I
Oh, I don't.
appreciate that because
I'm just more
yeah,
curious.
no,
Like, yeah,
but
what
you know
is
what?
that?
That's good. That's good because you know what? Today I showed the vulnerability, right? Usually the voiceover's off. So, but that adds to it. That adds to the nature of the conversation. This is supposed to be a real. This is a real conversation that we're actually having, and that's why we do this. But I would say that for blind people now, okay, and this comes from a perspective of someone that is really, by the way, I am not high tech. Let me just tell you that. I am not really a computer person. Podcasting now is just about recording stuff and then, in my case, just publishing.
Hmm.
It has become, recently, over the past few years, it has become the process that we would go through has become a lot more accessible to a lot more people, which is why the industry is so saturated. But the whole
Hmm.
concept has become a lot, much, much, much easier. So I use Zoom, right? I use VoiceOver on the iMac and VoiceOver on the phone to keep track of things. But mostly what I use is me, my voice, to record what I want to say and then, share it out through Anchor or YouTube or as you saw on Instagram, right? Many different platforms. And just over time, you have to build up the concept over years of doing it. But that's really how it all works for a blind person.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing.
of course.
Um, And one thing, I mean, I've learned quite a few things. I also think there's like, and I feel as though I'm in this chapter of my life where there's a lot of maybe more abstract things going on subconsciously that I'm learning, but I can't maybe articulate with words. And I would say that for this conversation, I think I'm learning a lot of things that I can't articulate now, and maybe after our conversation ends and I have time to process it, I bet I'd have more to share on it. But I think being a guest on someone else's show is not something I do often, but I always learn a lot in regards to even just the logistics of how another podcaster sets up their show, how they communicate in regards to like being like, hey, you want to come on my show, what platforms they use. But mainly I loved the questions you've been asking. And how you've really carried the conversation. It's like inspired me. And then your question of like how they really caught me off guard. I'm like, I want to do that. I want to test that out. So I love that. And
Yeah.
the your last question was what's the one question you want to ask me to make me sweat? Um, wait one sec. I have I have a list here of some of my favorite questions,
Oh,
but I
you
have one
oh, okay.
I
You
think
you you oh you have your very own list. Oh, that's cool. No one's done. Oh, that's cool.
I've been curating this list for a while. It's actually not that great, but
Now let's go to. Okay, wait, hold on. Go to page 11, third paragraph down.
it's just one okay, I have one. Has
Okay.
there ever been a guest on your show who has shifted your perspective in a way you didn't expect?
Yes. I've had a lot of people. Many years ago, I interviewed someone who is transgender, and that really, it was a really beautiful and a really, really great conversation. Also, another Canadian person, and that really helped me to understand their perspective on life and politics and what's really going on in their own, in their own inner circle, in their own community. So, absolutely, I think most guests should change my perspective or should question my perspective. And I think most guests should question the way that I think and should really create a tremendous amount of difference there. So I would say yes, definitely. There's been several people, but really any guest that comes to my show should not necessarily change my mind about the world, but should help me to see the world in a different way over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just thought of another. Can I ask a fourth
Of course you
question?
can.
Okay, that's and then this will be my last one. Um,
Okay.
and I want to see if I can word it correctly. But considering that you are blind, I don't like the word disability or disabled. So if you have a better word for that, I would love to hear that because I don't think it is like a I don't think you have a disadvantage. You were just built differently. And unfortunately, we live in a world that just kind of only conforms to one way of living.
Right.
But um, I'm curious, considering that you live in a world that is, yeah, I'm assuming really values sighted people. What is a strength that you think you've had to gain, considering that you are blind?
The strength I've had to gain is me. And if there was any other word for a disabled person, for disability, it's me. M-E. Because that's who I am. Probably I'm 100% sure that if I wasn't blind, we wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't have gone this way in life, and I wouldn't be a podcaster. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the word for it. Me, or in your case, you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word for it.
I love that. That's
If
great.
someone wants, outside of me, M-E, if someone in the audience wants to get in touch with Emma Krebs and all of the utterly stunning work that you're doing for the community, how would they get in touch with you?
My main platform is Instagram, kind of the only thing I hang out on, and it's at the Curious One podcast. So yeah, I love it when people just send me random DMs because I send strangers DMs all the time.
Good. So when I send you a DM next, you'll definitely know who it is.
Yeah.
That's very good. That's very good.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Keep up your great work in everything you're doing. Stay safe over there in Australia or Canada or LA, and definitely you're always welcome on my podcast. Do you know what I mean? And of course,
Yeah.
please, please come back. Please come back anytime. If you really know what I mean. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know
And
what you mean. I'm
and
sorry.
of course, that thing that you were saying in 7-8 about, do you know what I mean? How you picked up some British expressions over the.
You did okay. I didn't know because I was like, does it? Oh my god, Aaron, that's awesome. So
There we go.
I was
There
like,
we go.
is he making fun of me? Because I was like, did I say that a lot in this conversation? I thought I
Well,
withheld
see
it
what it
in this
was
conversation.
you teased yourself about saying it, and then
Yes.
I heard it, and then you said it, and then I heard it, and then I was like, I gotta squeeze it in there. I gotta get it.
That was great, Aaron. That
I
was
gotta
so
get that
good.
reaction. Thanks so
I
much,
get what you mean.
Is that well, very good. All right. Well, look, keep up your great work, and as we say here on Aaron's Opinion, take care, everyone. We'll see you next time. Help one person today. Help 1 million people tomorrow.